Hey guys, I'm Richard Fitzgerald. This is Dubai Works, where we interview the business leaders making a difference in this great city.
That business with scalability was very interesting to me.
I like building something that has legacy.
Welcome to another episode of Dubai Works Business Podcast. This week, I'm joined by Mr. Sanjay Dabur, who is the Vice President and Head of Energy Business at Sharaf DG Energy. He's got over 20 years industry experience and is spearheading the renewable energy business development with a focus on solar energy in particular in the Middle East region for the Sharaf Group. As everyone knows, Sharaf DG is well known in the consumer electronics and retail space. But what you might not have known is how advanced their energy business is as well. Today, we'll be focusing on that sector energy, their initiatives for residents, for businesses, and practices that are in line with the Dubai Clean Energy Strategy 2050. So today, the main topics we'll talk about are the current energy environment, as well as the UN's 2030 sustainability goal, in the residential in solar energy segment, and we'll also talk about the kind of more detailed initiatives that Sharaf DG Energy are doing here in the UAE. Welcome, Sanjay.
Thank you, Richard. Pleasure is mine.
Thanks for joining. So before we kind of go into the main topics, I was looking up your profile and your experience, and you have a wealth of experience from management to team to kind of cross everything from consumer electronics, mobile phones, flash imaging, IT, audio, software, storage. How did you end up in energy?
Well, I've been in Dubai for the last about 21 years now.
Okay.
And I was primarily focused in the distribution and retail business for a major part of the 20 years. But for the last about 3 years, I came on board Sharaf DG. I had been interacting with Sharaf DG for a long time. And Sharaf DG typically picks up a business challenge for the next decade.
Okay.
And has been known to bring non-industry specific professionals into the vertical or the industry they want to step into. And the reason for that is they want to go back to the first principles, take a step back, bring a non-industry expert in the industry and redefine the rules of the game. With that intention, I think I was brought into a challenge for building the energy business for Sharaf Group for the next decade.
Interesting. So when you joined a few years ago, that was the start of this business strategy for Sharaf DG. That was the start of their kind of really investing in the energy sector.
Right. So what happens, actually, Sharaf Group is a 40-year-old company. It has close to about 40 plus companies, more than 10,000 people working. It started as a shipping company way back.
A shipping company?
I started as a shipping company.
I didn't know that.
It's one of the largest shipping managing company in the region. What happened is that in the last 10 years, it was focused on retail. Has a huge success. Today, Sharaf DG is a household name with almost 25% of the retail market, with 1.5 million customers walking through its stores every month. With a eye on the future and the emerging trends, a concerted effort was made to understand what next. And the one important thing that happened in 2015 was Dubai came out with its Shams Dubai. Shams in Arabic means sun.
Yeah.
So it came out with a solar program for rooftop solar in UAE.
Okay.
And with its DNA being infrastructural, when the company started, Sharaf being very close to consumer at heart, it thought that distributed energy being produced right on top of your house, is the space that we belong to. We have been bringing technology to you over the years, and we thought this is the next technology that we need to bring into homes.
Okay, interesting. So I can understand the logic and the strategy And it's interesting how you described it as being a 10-year thing. I'm reminded of the phrase that we vastly overestimate what we can achieve in a year and underestimate what we can achieve in a decade.
Absolutely.
So I suppose in this space, it's quite, the shift of energy is quite new, maybe, as in the current kind of pace of change in energy is very fast, but the shift, we've relied on the same energy sources predominantly for the last 50 years or so. How do you view that space, and how do you view the current kind of energy industry?
That's a good question. So, Richard, what's happened is that in the last about 100 years, there's been a 60% increase in greenhouse gases.
Okay.
What that has done is that it has increased the temperature of the planet by about a degree centigrade. But if we continue at the same rate, in the next century, this will be about 4 degrees centigrade, 4.1 degrees centigrade. What this basically means is that in the last about 100 years, the sea level rose by about, let's say, about 20 centimeters. And the last 20 years, it rose by 8 centimeters. If we continue at this rate, we're talking about 2.2 meters in the next 100 years. So all this is at these, we have put so much carbon out there into the atmosphere and disrupted the delicate ecological balance, and the floods, the droughts, we've been seeing them, the forest fires. So we have almost reached, by some analysis, we've reached a point of no return. If we actually don't mitigate these, take steps today, then we are entering into a permanent damage to this beautiful blue planet that we have.
Yeah.
So there is a very strong ecological rationale to do so, but more importantly, parallelly, a very important trend has panned out. The solar energy over the last 10 years has now become a very good commercial alternative. Actually, what has happened is that solar.
Can you explain that a bit more from a commercial sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
So yes. So basically, what has happened is so today solar is the cheapest source of producing electricity.
Because it comes from the wind and natural elements.
So no, see, 10 years ago, solar panels in the last 10 years, the cost of solar panels has dropped by about 80%.
Okay.
So the cost at which you can produce electricity using solar plant is about $2.4. Compare that with electricity produced from gas, which is about $3.5, and with oil, that's about $8, and nuclear is $10. So last year, solar actually became the largest new energy deployment, overtaking coal for the first time in the history of mankind.
Okay.
So renewables have become less expensive. There is a very compelling commercial reason now, in addition to the major challenge that we have for preserving the planet. So the two sort of play in, and today make a very strong value proposition.
Okay, interesting. So just taking a step back, and you touched on the kind of very interesting statistics to kind of bring this home to people in the rising sea levels and the temperature of the planet. And I think there was an activist group in the US this week who put a ticking clock on Times Square to show how many days and minutes we have until it goes to minus 1.5%, 1.5 something. I don't know exactly the number, but it's kind of, there is a clock on this, and there are initiatives. We see kind of countries getting together and having initiatives, and China has talked a lot about in terms of being the highest producer because of the size of the economy of emissions, carbon emissions. But what is the UAE doing, and what is the kind of initiative that the UAE has put in place that I alluded to at the start?
Richard, that's a good question. See, basically, it's my personal take, but unfortunately, a very, very important initiative, a very compelling next decade challenge for the inhabitants of this planet was to shift from fossil fuels to renewable sources of energy. And that dialogue, somehow or the other, the only mention it gets in news is of let us say, activists. And I appreciate the concern that they show, but probably the the profiling that it creates for such a compelling need of the hour may not necessarily resonate with a large population out there. I think the other way to build the right narrative, and I think Dubai has taken that, and UAE has taken that initiative in 2015. Actually, in 2017, UAE announced its 2050 energy strategy.
Okay.
And under that strategy, it's like a interesting. All energy by 2050 in UAE has to come from clean sources, mostly renewable. There has to be a 70% reduction in the carbon footprint of the country. We may be one of the highest per capita energy consumers in the world, thanks to the flagellating economy. Now, the third thing is to reduce consumption, or let's say consumption efficiencies have to be improved by about 40%. So we have to reduce consumption on the demand side by energy preservation, conservation, and efficiency. And on the supply side, we need to bring in renewable sources like solar. So this is what was the vision announced in 2017 for 2050. And by 2020, 7% of clean energy was targeted to come from renewable sources. A target which the busy countries already achieved.
Okay.
It's well on its path. Actually, His Highness Sheikh Mohammed has said that by 2030, every home or every building in UAE should have solar on top of its roof.
Yeah.
So that will be about 25% of the goal already met.
Wow.
We're well on the way. And one of the best things that's happened is that it's not just policy announcement. The country has already put a framework in place in 2015, the Shams Dubai program. I would say it's one of the most well-balanced policy documents out there. I mean, if you look at Europe or US and the challenges they went through, and then to be able to launch with such a well-defined document, and then encourage it by taking half of that initiative on its own shoulders, the government has deployed half of that to the 2.5 gigawatt peak that had to be installed by 2020. It's already done. It's under commissioning.
And the second half, the policy, is that for residents or for businesses? And how yeah.
Yes, good point. So basically, that is exactly for the businesses to step forward, for the private sector to step forward and deploy on commercial and industrial establishments, and of course, corporate offices that want to lead the sustainability goal, bring down their cost, contribute to the larger vision, and of course the residential sector.
Okay. So developers and also individuals in homes and places and residential. Are there incentives, or how does it work in specific? And I don't mean this in a sort of questioning the strategy, but you see when there's a good initiative put in place by a government, and if companies get behind it, essentially companies are commercial entities. So other than the benefits, the ecological benefits for the planet, and then also for, as you explained quite well, the cost of energy is becoming cheaper. Are there commercial benefits for this strategy? Does your bottom line increase in 10 years' time?
Yeah, so I think a good way to look at this would be to step back and see how the other governments of the world have done it.
Great, yeah.
So, you had Europe with the feed-in tariffs, which means they were supporting you for producing electricity and putting back into the grid at rates higher than at which you were buying it, which means incentivizing you to put on solar. Then, of course, in US, we had, you have, let's say, significant tax, and you could give tax incentives to stimulate deployment of solar. And what happened actually after, and initial impetus given in these ways in those markets, all these benefits were suddenly restructured or withdrawn, wiping out big segments of industries that were built around bottom lines defined on that business maths. Dubai took a slightly, or UAE took a slightly different route. Instead of throwing in a stack of incentive today and taking it away tomorrow, it very clearly defined that you could feed the grid back in at the same rate at which you're taking electricity from the grid. From top down on the tariff rate, which means today for a unit of electricity, 1 kilowatt hour, you pay about 44.5 cents, fills, 44.5 fills. And when you produce your own electricity, say on top of your home, and excess electricity goes back to the grid, you get paid at the rate of 44.5. Now that's a very stable long-term perspective, rather than let's say a sweetener, a short-term sweetener. It's more of a long-term enabler.
Yeah.
And parallelly, what the government has also done is to create clarity on the processes. It's set very good service level agreements. It's the turnaround times that these agencies show is one of the best in the world.
Wow.
The kind of speed that the permitting DIVA shows, it's probably one of the best anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
So add to it the fact that the government also has indicated that it just does not want some of the largest energy companies of the world shift sharp to UAE today and then probably treat this as just another market. It has been supporting all local initiatives as well as international initiatives in the sense that it is more focused on ensuring that almost every commercial or non-commercial entity in UAE plans or deploys, say, solar on top of their roof, rather than these large on-ground farms being built. That part has been kept by His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum Solar Park, 1 gigawatt peak. It's miles of panels on the ground.
Yeah.
But that piece is with the utility sector, with DIVA, with consortiums, and together with DIVA, with government. Whereas the other sectors, which are more amenable to, let us say, more focused commercial players within this market, rather than some energy giants looking at large projects. So it's more close to the industry, close to home, more close to the residents. I would say very very finely crafted. I do not know if that was the aim, but that's how it has panned out.
It's very interesting, and when you phrase it and when you understand it from a long-term planning point of view, it makes one think of why it's good to have leaders and people putting a long-term plan in place rather than short-term incentives, whether it's the next whether your stint in charge is short-term. And I think there was a lot of debate globally at the start of this year. COVID kind of changed the narrative, but changed the conversation. But from a CEO sort of mantra at the start of this year on the kind of global listed companies, the environment was very front and center, and there's a lot of initiatives put in place. But sometimes CEO of listed companies are looking at the next quarter, not even a couple of years. So when you see Sharaf DG as a private company and working within a region that's also kind of long-term planning with these initiatives, you can see why this can help a sector such as energy, which some things can happen overnight, but not we can't all switch tomorrow to a new product or service when it comes to energy. So it's interesting to see it from a planning point of view, the benefits of thinking long term.
Yes, and see, doing good is, we as commercial entities, we want to do well.
Yeah.
But we also want to do good, because doing well for ourselves is not good enough. So as a company, we want to play larger than just the commercial benefit of the enterprise.
Okay, what is the commercial product? I see the lovely Instagram account on Sharaf DG Energy and a nice website, and it explains it as well as you've explained the strategy. But what's the commercial element? For example, I know solar power in the home and the residential, but we see a lot of news this week about Battery Day and what's happening in the US and Elon Musk, and it's all very topical. And but I can understand that because I know what a battery is, and I know what a price of it might be for a car, etc. But when we talk of energy and Sharaf DG Energy, what's the commercial aspect? What's the product?
Yes, so it's pretty simple actually.
Yeah.
It's one of those simpler products out there. Basically,
yeah,
it starts generating electricity.
Okay.
And it'll keep doing that for the next 25 years. So basically, all I need to do of the system that can be put on top of your roof. The solar system or a plant would have three major components. It'll have a solar panel, which converts the light energy, and the electrical energy produces a DC current. Now you need an inverter, which is basically the brain of this whole system, and converts the DC to AC, so that you can use it in your premise.
AC
is alternating current. So
Okay.
direct current.
Yeah.
So the panels produce direct current, and the inverter converts this direct current into alternating currents. And it of course has several other finer roles to play, but essentially you have a panel producing electricity, an inverter converting into AC that you can then use in your home.
Yeah.
And the rest is the balance of system. These panels are put on some sort of a racking system, and there are wires that are very nicely defined and taken to your, let's say, your electrical panel, and then you connect it to the Diva grid.
Okay.
So any electricity that you produce gets first consumed by your home or your commercial establishment itself. Any excess electricity, on a Friday you've gone out, your solar panel, sun is still out, they're still producing electricity, you're not consuming any, gets put back into the grid. And somewhere between your house and the Diva grid sits a meter, a solar meter. It's a bidirectional meter. If you are taking electricity, your electricity bill is going up. When you're putting electricity back into the grid, your Diva is paying you back. So you get what is called net metering.
Okay.
So net metering allows you to bring your electricity bill down. But the point that we need to look at, because we get a mention of batteries many times. Why do you need a battery? I mean, suppose you were living in a part of the world where there's no electricity at all, and you had solar panels as a solution. You could generate your own electricity by the day. But what happens in night? You don't have any electrical current now.
Okay.
So you could put batteries, so that during the day you produce electricity, you use electricity, and some electricity is used to charge these batteries, which during nighttime run your electricity. But when you have a very stable grid like the way you have in UAE, I would challenge you to tell me when was the last time you saw a blip or you had no electrical supply at home. So
I don't recall.
I've been here 21 years,
Yeah.
and there was one blip, I think about 17, 18 years ago, and it was headlines in newspapers, and it was under a minute.
Okay.
I have not seen that over a decade now. So this is one of the best grids that you can have anywhere in the world.
Right.
So there is no compelling reason for you to increase the cost of your solar system by adding batteries to it. You connect yourself to the grid. When solar electricity is being generated, you use it. When there is no solar electricity, you use the Diva grid electricity, or your whichever emirate you are in, Fiva grid electricity.
Okay.
So the reason for a battery as of now may not be compelling, but going down the road a few years from now, there are other reasons why battery would come into play. because
Okay.
you build the grid around plants that would um, gas plants, and now we also have nuclear in the play. But as solar kicks in, imagine during midday, almost everybody is producing solar electricity, and nobody's taking electricity from the grid.
Okay.
Now, what should the utility do? At what capacity should they build the grid? At what capacity should they deploy the hardware and all of the parameters of the grid?
Yeah. Interesting.
If a large part of the electricity during the day is going to come from solar, but that's maybe a 5 or a 10 year, if not 10, maybe like 5 to 7 years away. And that's when probably the smart grids and louder definitions of the right grid for any country
Yeah.
would start kicking in. But Dubai has been smart enough to actually
Yeah.
bring some semblance of control on that already.
Yeah. Can you explain it? So I wish I knew more about the overall industry. I have very, very surface level knowledge of the energy sector. But so I'm understanding a bit more about how important renewables and clean energy is to replace existing energy sources, and you know that can be related to building homes and building commercial buildings as well. Is that part of a new? If I'm a construction company and I want to build a mall or say a new airport or a apartment complex, is there a requirement from a solar energy point of view? And then do I then go and purchase these panels from Sharaf DG?
Okay, so Richard, we have a very good view from where we are sitting. If you look outside, almost all those roofs out there, they're all covered on the top by HVAC system. These are heat ventilation and air conditioning systems on top of the roof.
Okay.
You see, in the last few decades, the one important challenge for this part of the world was how can you have these excellent temperatures that you have today inside the building?
Yeah.
Nobody really
thinks about it.
Thought about leaving space for what's about to come.
Okay.
So there are about 200,000 buildings in UAE.
Okay.
About 60,000 of them are let's say.
It's a good start. I never heard that one before. Right. Good knowledge, yeah.
Yes. And
60,000 of them are.
The 6,000 of them are, let us say, villas or buildings with single story where you can put solar relatively more easily.
Yeah.
These tall vertical buildings in the current technology format do not have much space on top of the roof. So, but if you look at a warehouse or let's say a manufacturing plant, they have large roofs. Schools, hospitals, these are all places where you find large roofs. And some of the villas have large enough a roof. Almost all villas have large enough a roof to offset a good part of electricity. So depending on the size of your roof, you can offset anywhere from 20, 30, 40, and in some cases almost 90% or 100% of your electricity by putting solar.
Okay, so it could be an individual. So basically, sorry to interrupt. The first opportunity is converting existing premises.
Right. That's what I was coming to.
Yeah.
So now you have 200,000 buildings out there. There's a certain rate at which new buildings will come into play. A CAGR of about 4% annual growth was there before let us say the excitement around 2020 started building that rate up. So you're only adding as much of the total existing buildings as new buildings. So two parts to it. Retrofitting the existing buildings is probably the first and immediate attractive segment for almost all governments and commercial entities to focus on. Having said that, now it's not officially put out there, but there has been these discussions about mandating that all new buildings must have provision for solar on top of the roof. And that's a design integration, which is not difficult at all. You can plan your HVAC and your solar early on. In fact, several buildings in 2020 Expo would actually demonstrate that. So BIPV, built-in photovoltaics, has been there. And as as economies, as societies get more sensitized to this awesome solution out there. I mean, imagine. It's, I mean, sometimes I give this story. You'll be using fossil fuel. Fossil fuels is eons, millions of years of buried organic matter,
Yeah.
stratas after strata, found in some places as concentrated pools of oil, let's say.
More common in the
So
Middle
you
East. Yeah.
yes, and then you drill, and bring it out, and then you pump it hundreds of miles into some refinery or a plant, and then generate electricity, and then pump it back through grids and bring it home to you. Instead, put something on top of your roof, generate your electricity, and use it
Yeah.
there and then.
Yeah.
The total amount of energy that the planet receives in 1 hour can take care of all energy needs of the planet for the full year. So there's so much abundance of solar, wind, and other renewable energy out there that it's just a matter of time. So there's a very strong commercial reason too. I mean, if you can offset your electricity bills at the rate I just mentioned,
You save money, yeah. But also there's a commercial.
yes. So
Right, yeah.
you have an IRR of 20% plus. You're talking about paybacks of let's say 4 to 5 years commercial assets. So going forward,
But just to clarify, so energy, even renewable energy and clean energy, is still a commodity, so it still has value. So there's still incentive to produce it for commercial entities.
a very strong, compelling reason. That is why there is now a very good offtake in Dubai. In fact, DEWA had to this January sort of come out and say, look, it reserves the right to the number of approvals it can give in 1 year.
Okay.
And of course, it completely facilitates the process. DEWA really handholds you through projects. So you can see they have a commitment to purpose. They want to ensure deployment of solar. But you can imagine with the flurry of interest in that,
Yeah.
there may be some gate crashing there.
Interesting.
And it says, look, I reserve the right in case
Yeah.
to let people in.
Yeah.
So that's the sort of interest around it right now.
But just so that's really interesting from a kind of an industry opportunity point of view. I've seen some sort of traditional, known as oil companies, rebrand as energy companies, even from a logo point of view and things like that. But typically, if I understood it now as you've explained it well, I would expect traditional energy companies to be in this space. I'm sure they are, but why would a company who hasn't been in this space enter it and have an opportunity in it? Why hasn't the energy companies already? That's their space. Right? How is there any gap? DEWA letting people in or not? But if you understand it, like how can, if I'm making manufacturing iPhones, how can I move in and manufacture energy? What if Apple had a renewable energy, as some of them are starting to do? But yeah.
So this is an interesting question, Richard. It has to be understood in, we can look at this in two ways. So if I'm an incumbent, if I'm the energy sector, and some of us, so I'm not talking about Sharaf now. I'm talking about the companies that are large energy companies, oil companies, for example. They've been there for decades. Some of them for about 100 years. They have created that success on a certain profit formula.
Yeah.
They have mastered the art of creating right fossil fuels. This world has been run on fossil fuels for decades. That's what they do best. Now, the challenge is to move away from it. So some of them would transition, but as has been seen in other industries, most of them probably wouldn't. There's an inertia to success. If I'm good at something, not all of us would challenge ourselves to figure out what's our next good S-curve, let's say.
Yeah, so Mr. Sanjay, I think we understand disruption, and we, as in I do from other fields, say the media space, and tech companies can come in. But from a incumbency point of view and moving legacy kind of systems to a new product might be hard. And usually the one that does well is the startup, the fresh approach. I think at an event in the region last year, and you might know the name of the company, Red Something, an energy company set up by a founder who used to work for Tesla, is now producing a new form of energy. Excuse my ignorance, but so that's what I would expect. This guy came from Tesla, saw the energy problem they're trying to solve, and then created something new. What I wouldn't expect is someone, a company who has such experience in a completely different, and to make a good fist of it and against even a company you find it hard to take around because they've got so much experience in energy, right?
Right. So, let me, I said, there are two parts to it. Of course,
Yeah.
there is the incumbent. And now there are others, as you said, they're agile, they're innovative, and they want to jump in. They can see the trend emerging. So that's, you also have several startups, and right now we have more than 140 companies registered in Dabur to do solar. So a lot of people also jumped into solar and other renewable energy solutions. But there's a challenge here. We also need the right business model for this to be sustained. We are at a stage where a narrative has to be built around it.
Okay.
Somebody has to talk to the market, bring home the fact that the change is happening. And if I'm too small, too early, I may not have the bandwidth to invest in that piece of the business model. The advantage with companies like, for example, Sharaf DG would be that we're already close to the customer. So I don't have to go to the customer and first explain who am I.
True.
We have built that trust over decades. It's taken us more than a decade to be the, let us say, the harbinger of new technology kind of a place, right? So we brought technology into homes, consumer electronics, for example, and electricals. And we can see what is coming. And we see a role there. We need to bring that message home. So there is this compulsion that the incumbent has, which may not give him the agility or the, let us say, probably the focus. And they, of course, are some of them are working in this sector as a part of a smaller part of their business is working on renewables too. But it's probably not the incumbent energy companies. Neither, and I don't mean it in a discouraging sense, entrepreneurs are able to substantially contribute to it. All of them have a role to play, but somebody with a little more, let us say, a longer trust factor and an emerging technology sector recognition probably has some advantages, we would consider.
So I can understand, and you describe it again well about the narrative for the industry and education, but and hopefully that will come, and you and this in a small way, this interview will help in a small way, but a narrative internally and a narrative on Sharaf DG Energy for you, because not only do incumbent energy companies need to change or can change and have a different margin and a different business model than they're used to, a retail company also has disruptive forces in terms of their existing business model. So I'm not asking a question of why focused energy somewhere else, because Sharaf Group has, as you said, over 100 companies. So it's okay. So I get that why you might have a different strategy, but the internal conversation, the narrative around how we can make the margins for energy would be very different for retail. So how is that conversation going for you?
Yes. So yes, if there's a business management student out there listening, I think this may be of some help. So first, I want to make a small correction.
Yeah.
Large oil companies or fossil companies are also, playing it out in the renewable field. It's not that they're averse to it. It's just that business model compulsions will give them different levels of interest and accelerated engagement in the sector. That's a different piece altogether. And so I do not want to pass a judgment on that wisdom. They know best what they're doing.
Yeah.
As far as Sharaf is concerned, look, we started as an infrastructural company. So we have been doing this for decades now.
Yeah.
We have more than 800 assets that we maintain in UAE. So, so that business model is not new. What has happened is that in the last 10 years, we got into electronics and fashion retail. So we have about a dozen brands and over 300 stores that we have in the region. So the B2C engagement, business to direct consumer engagement, sort of positioned the brand as if it's a pure retail brand, but essentially it carries the DNA of a B2B company. So they're the best of the two worlds.
Okay.
So even as we know and understand a business model around B2B engagement, we have the benefit of recognition of the brand as far as the end consumers are concerned. So end of the day, every B2B customer is actually a B2C customer. There is a CEO somewhere who is my customer of an an electronic store. And as and when he sees that we have the capability, and we have demonstrated that capability, we have done we have done more than 250 energy projects in UAE already.
Yeah, interesting. But not all B2B companies are entering this space. Maybe DIWA aren't letting them in, but not all. So it's a strategic decision. It fits what you're good at, as you've identified, but it is quite a strategic decision, yeah?
Yes, I mean, that would be a nice word to use, but yes, there's a lot of thought that's gone into it. And we thought that we could bring value.
Okay.
The deciding factor was, is there a value that we can really bring?
Price value or a service value or a product?
So if you see Sharaf, the best way to attrition value would be play with price.
Yeah.
Getting cheaper is probably is not the only value that the consumer needs today. The economies of scale from manufacturing to the complete supply chain and the maturity of delivery to the customer through various B2B or B2C go-to-market strategies that exist. Price is not where the real differentiator sits anymore. Whatever you can do it for $10, I can do it for 9.8. If I can't, somebody else can. Question is, within the $10, can I bring you more value?
Okay.
And what is that additional value that I can bring for you? So our challenge is not that, and we understand this, is not that we just make it cheaper for you. An Apple phone, you would pay another $10 for it, and probably another 10. Now, so
because of the strong brand.
So a brand,
and everything, yeah.
If I started saying Sharaf DG is the best energy company out there, it's not a story, Richard, anybody other than who probably lives with me or works with me would buy that easily.
Needs more substance to it, yeah.
So it takes a commitment to purpose and an actual delivery to build that trust. I mean, we didn't become Sharaf DG just because we had a fancy looking logo at that time and it was introduced, or we had these hoardings all across the town. No, every single transaction that took place in the last 12 years contributed its bit to build the trust in that brand. And today, when we foray into the energy sector with all validation and everything, it's that trust that we need to stand up to.
Okay.
So we have a purpose here. We have a commitment here.
Yeah.
And we have an expectation that we have to live up to.
Great. It's interesting to hear it from that perspective. Thanks for sharing. So 2 more questions and kind of in the same area about the future. One generic around this region as an emerging market. What's your view on that? Do you see, not really just from a Sharaf Group lens, but What's your kind of perspective of the GCC, the Middle East as an emerging market, in the context that when I was growing up, they told us, I always ask this question, but they told us about the BRIC nations and Brazil, Russia, India, and China, and they're the emerging markets. And the word emerging, what follows is you've emerged. You just assume that will happen, but that didn't happen in the same degree. Clearly, one economy has emerged faster than another. Some maybe aren't, and then India is clearly emerging at a rapid pace at the moment. And some, so it's not a given that the Middle East emerges. Do you think it will? And what's your view?
Oh, I bet my life on it.
Great.
I spent 21 years here,
Yeah.
and I was asked this question, and I have invested in ways that prove that I am committed.
Yeah.
And there was a very interesting question me and my wife would face very early on, and when we were looking, there was this real estate booming in Dubai, and we would be interested in some of these properties that were coming in, and our cohorts or families would ask us, do you really want to invest? And for us, we used to wonder why everything was out there to be seen.
Why would they ask that question? Why it wasn't obvious?
Yes,
Yeah, okay.
You could actually see, plans being made and plans being executed. So I think the magic is in the leadership.
Okay.
And to expect that every country will probably, grow and take off at the same rate is too much to expect. The point to look at, from my perspective, would be what sector are we? What are we emerging about? What is this emerging about? I've seen some of the finest curtsies where I think there are other markets across the world that need to still emerge.
Okay.
I've seen cultural values here,
True.
which I think several other markets are yet to come up to. Energy is the next big transitional leap that will pan out over the next few decades. That's emerging for all of the world. The point is, what have the countries in this part of the world, imagine, known for its, oil-rich reserves, these are some of the countries that have begun pivoting. And Dubai has sort of led the charge, not just as an emirate, but of course, UAE as a country. And a standard and an example has been set for other countries, and several other countries have been following that model.
Yeah.
So the quote-unquote emerging is happening around, let us say, the emerging, let us say, renewable sector or the new energy solution, and that's a big place. Electric vehicles, sustainable way of living. These are no longer, for let us say, very innovative piece of the larger bell-shaped curve. These are now becoming an areas of interest and engagement and deployment for a larger emerging segment of players, be they individual, corporations, institutions, or governments.
Interesting. Again, thank you. Nicely explained and a good context. I think from from an emerging market, usually the metrics would be GDP or middle class or things like that. But I think to understand it from an energy point of view is pertinent. And kind of leading on to the final question around the future, you might, a narrative around energy, and what role does, say, Expo 2020 that will now start next year have to play in that? And I see when I'm out cycling in Al Qudra, I see this solar energy facility, but I don't know what it does. Like, what are these sort of tangible things, such as how Expo has been built and the narrative around that? How do you think they're important to what's been happening here?
So, sometimes I get asked this question: that what will Expo 2020 do? So my take on that is, like my take on emerging market was maybe slightly different from just GDP and
Yeah.
some of the factors being, that
There's
of
a
course is
cultural
that is
element
of
as well,
course
which is nice,
the
yeah.
standard way of looking at it. I just wanted to throw in
Yeah.
a perspective to it.
Yeah.
But coming to this,
Appreciate it.
if it was not 2020, if it was anything else, Dubai would still spin some magic around it. So, so Dubai, so 2020 is an identified opportunity to create, to use as a base for creating the message for the future and make a statement about the country and make a statement about where we need to focus as humanity. So, what I'm trying to say is that the fact that Dubai hosts it is more important than that it is 2020.
Okay.
And the fact that it has moved from the challenges of this year to the next year, initially when we were looking at how things are happening, say in the first quarter of this year, towards the end of the first quarter of this year, and what would happen to 2020, there was this big question. But after having, lived through these next few months, I can say this, and correct me if it doesn't make sense. Look at the timing now. If we had the current health challenge, let's say, let's say mitigated. If tomorrow there was no such problem, what is the first thing you would want to do? Would you not want to travel?
I think
Would you
the
not
first
want
thing
to?
that comes to people's mind, yeah.
Wouldn't you want to go places? Wouldn't you want to find out what's the next that we need to engage with? Wouldn't you go to a place, one of those more beautiful places on the planet, in definitely some sense of the word, and go and see what this expo is about? What does the future look like? Don't you think Dubai will ramp it up like nothing else? Don't you think all of this sort of is about waiting to happen?
Yeah.
So look at the timelines. Isn't there a case for some, I'm not a medical expert, but isn't there a very strong case for some solution emerging over the next few months to take away the disadvantages that the current situation may have created?
Yeah.
So I may sound optimistic, but you're looking at October next year, and we are in October this year, right? I'm a little more confident about the world finding medical solution to it before that, and unleash a pent up need to go out and ride it.
Yeah. I love the optimism. Can I challenge you on one part of it?
Sure.
Because behaviors change, there's digitalization, transformation, but also traveling costs money. Vaccines might cost money or might not, but where we will be next year in 12 months' time, the numbers that might be expected from a footfall point of view mightn't really be possible from an economic personal travel expense. Some of the numbers that we've heard from semi-government entities around footfall in the airport expect the 2019 numbers to be in 2024. The best estimate for this year are 22 million passengers as opposed to 89 million last year and 32 million next year. So from a football point of view, but maybe you should work for Dubai Tourism, because maybe if anyone's going to pick one place, they need to come to Expo. So if the choice is smaller, but yeah.
Of course, what you're saying is how it looks to an analyst.
Yeah.
But I draw your attention to the fact that I'm not suggesting that all of it will be normal straight away.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is that the drop in disposable income, or let's say the capacity to spend to undertake travel or any other such enterprise, will drop by a factor, of course. But so would a pent-up demand be building in. So you need to play both factors out to see what is the net sum game eventually.
Okay.
But having said that, if the net sum game is that The delta is not as big as the travel agencies, travel experts would want to forecast, or analysts would want to forecast, because you need to sort of add the piece that the pent-up demand brings, but also the fact that when the demand is released, and you're talking about the globe, there's 7.5 billion people out there. A good number of them have fallen into a statistical definition of how much tourism you should expect for an economy of. But the fact that you are able to attract an X percentage higher than, say, for example, some other place on the planet, then you play all these factors together. I have cause for optimism.
Great. I love it. I love hearing it, and it's refreshing to hear. Thank you. So, on a final note, what's a tangible takeaway that you're hoping after the expo for the energy sector? Would it be that there's more foreign direct investment into companies here, or would it be that there's more awareness from in general about the narrative that you kind of needs to happen for it to accelerate this shift?
Both of them, but the more immediate challenge is awareness.
Yeah.
It is the narrative.
Okay.
And you'll be very surprised that the single biggest challenge that we face when we put these value proposition on a table for a potential buyer, they try to understand what's the catch in it. I mean, you're going to save money. There are solutions where you don't even have to invest. You can pay from your savings that you make because of putting in solar or other renewable solution. And then you're saving the planet.
Yeah.
So where is the catch? So point is, the number of people that who have understood this is a progressively growing number. And let us say the count which is commercially viable today is not significant enough for it to be seen as, oh, this is another thing that in any case has to happen.
Yeah.
So I think 2020, what it will do is it will bring it center stage.
Yeah.
It will give the opportunity for players like us and you to bring the story home. We need children walking out of school are better sensitized at what to do about energy than some of the people. I moved away, but some of the people of my age would probably not buy that story so well.
Yeah.
And all the money would sit with such decision makers. So I think the new generation is a little more closer to the emerging idea of renewables.